If you have two shoes, it is time that you need to sell one and buy a sword. If you have two trousers, you need to sell one and buy a sword. Because now it is a time for revolution. And this revolution is no longer on streets, it's not even on Facebook, it is not on YouTube. This revolution is in the mind. Because everything emerges as a result of what people think and what people create from their power of imagination. It means the mind of everyone is the source of everything that the man need for solution to his problem. Peace and power to every African family. From wherever you find yourself, I greet you with peace and power. Welcome to this our weekly rendezvous where we actually meet to discuss certain important things regarding the ACUP, the free-minded, and state of African continent, generally speaking. Please allow me to, before I speak about today's subject, I just want to maybe reflect a bit on the France-Africa summit that ended yesterday in France, Montpellier, that's the name of the town. I just want to reflect on this because normally this summit used to take place every year, being organized by French government, where they invite all African leaders, most particularly from the Francophone zone, to discuss the relationship between Africa and France. So this year, the summit has taken a spectacular shift in a way that the French government has decided to not invite the African head of states anymore. The French government now turned to the African civil societies. The people who were invited in the France-Africa summit this year were not representative of African states. We're just, people who are in the civil societies, social workers, and so on. These are the people that were invited in the summit, and this is very significant because we need to analyze everything. The bottom line is that French has no interest to see Africa emerging. Neither does the US or England or Belgium or even Germany, even China. None of these countries have no interest to see Africa emerging and becoming what it's meant to be, which is a powerful continent of powerful people. So what is the purpose for French government or French president to turn around and drop African heads of states this time and go to the civil society? This is very significant and we need to understand it. And the simple reason is because recently there's been some kind of consciousness or awareness among African people. Today's generation is no longer that generation of ignorant people that could have been, lied to as it happened in the past. Now, the young people know much about their situation. They know their conditions, and they are now standing against the corrupt government and standing against the imperialism. And the fact is that recently we have heard, for example, in Mali, we have heard 2 coups d'etats that have happened apparently in 2 years consecutive. One just happened recently. We have heard another one, Guinea. So all these movements, even though they are military coup d'etat, but these militaries who are overthrowing their presidents are young people. So it's a kind of knowledge and attitude among the young people in Africa. The lack of job, lack of economy, lack of infrastructure, lack of service delivery, everything that we are confronting now, is kind of leading the young people to stand against the power structure. And France know exactly that it will come to the point where it cannot now manage the situation through the directors or their managers who are the African head of states, because what they do best is to be the managers of the imperialism or imperialist projects in Africa, to keep the African young people in a state of deprivation, in a state of contentment with their sufferings, without really addressing the issues that we are confronting in Africa or that we are facing in Africa. So France used to act through the African heads of states. So now they are realizing that now the young people are actually standing and overthrowing the bad governments and stuff like that. So now they are trying to approach now directly the African young people, you know, the civil society. They are trying to go straight to you know, to the main subject, which is now to get to approach the young people in Africa, to approach the civil society, to approach all the grassroots movements in order to indoctrinate them now with the French understanding of French philosophy, or as the term that I heard mostly in the meeting yesterday was universal values, which is a lie, because we know whenever they talk about universal values, they're actually talking about French or European values or Eurocentric values, because the dominant values in the world today is the way that Europeans perceive the world. That's what we learn at school. That's what we are, you know, we are forced to adopt it in a working environment. That's what we see in the banking system. Everything is Eurocentric values, even though they were talking about universal values, because anything that Europeans come up with is called universal. You know, just like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. Even though we know that in Mali we have what is called Charte de Mendeleev, which is a proper declaration of human rights before Europeans got to know that they should be a human right. Anyway, let's put that aside. The point here is that African millennials, African youth, we must understand every time the enemy makes a move, you have to think wisely. Why is he making this move? And what does he want to achieve? Because one thing we often forget is that every group of people in this world aims to control the world, right? Let me repeat that again. Every group of people in this world do everything they can do in order to control the world, except African people. As we are good in following other people, as we are good in accepting the cooperation, the bilateral cooperation, the negotiations, or the partnership and working together, unity, and those kind of nonsense stuff that have no meaning, really profound meaning in our lives. As we are good for what we call multiculturalism. We want to adopt every culture because we are living in a globalized world. That's what we are being told. But except from us, whether you talk about Chinese, Indians, Arabs, Europeans, all of them are willing to control the world, and controlling the world by using the key, which is the African resources. So where do you put yourself? So what was done yesterday in France was done in the context of gaining the emerging voice in the African civil society in order to indoctrinate them, in order to put them as a window dressing Negroes for the masses of the people, so that France can continue its projects of control and domination of Africa. Because they've seen now that in most cases, head of states are becoming irrelevant in Africa, because actually politicians actually are being replaced with corporations, with the capitalist corporations now in the world. So it's actually making sense that French or European powers can now turn to the grassroots power structure, which is the African population, to now trying to cooperate with them. What is the reason for you to jump the African heads of state to go to the civil society and are trying to cooperate with them, trying to establish relationship with them? People who have no decision, because on the other side, you have French president who has a decision, who has a decisional power. He can make decision based on his position of president, right? On the other hand, you have civil societies who have no decision anyway, who cannot change the policy anyway, except from their influence. So we need to be careful about it. The enemy will try all the strategies, but we need to understand the strategies of the enemy. And the one thing that we need to know at the back of our mind is that only Africans can do something that will change the conditions of Africa. If we don't put ourselves in the forefront of whatever that has to be done, then that means we are, we are sentencing ourselves to fail again, or to go back to a very harsh slavery. We close that subject. Peace and power to you again. So today, the subject matter that we want to discuss is that the African intellectualism, is it a tool for African alienation? Is it a solution, or is it a tool for African alienation? The reason is that when you look in the 1960s, when African states began to gain independence through the efforts of some heroes, some people that we call the founding fathers of African independence. Let's put it in that way. When you look in 1960s to the present day, you look at the level of intellectualism in that time and today. There's a huge difference, right? I believe particularly, I remember that I remember reading somewhere in the 1960s in the Congo, for example, in DRC, in the 1960s, there were only 4 PhD graduates. 4 PhD graduates in the Congo. Today, thousands of them. Thousands of them. I was trying to search proper statistics regarding Africa as a continent, in terms of finding out how many graduates of PhD degrees we heard in Africa in the 1960s and today, but I don't get really a proper response. But what I could get was that, for example, we have, I wrote it somewhere here, we have in the world today, globally speaking, we have 156 million PhD degrees, right? 2% of the global population possess PhD degrees in the world today. When you come to, for example, to South Africa, in 2017 there were 3,057 PhD degrees, while in 2001 there were only 804 PhD degrees. So why am I saying this? I'm saying this because whenever we have people who are gaining more knowledge, it means people who are educated. As many as people we get who are educated, it implies that we have a potential to solve our problems. It implies that we have a potential to use our resources to create the wealth here in Africa, and to use that wealth in order to emancipate African people, right? Because if we, for example, if we had 4 graduates of PhD degrees in the Congo in 1960s, and today we have like thousands of them, it should be implying that the condition of people in the Congo must be much better than it was in 1960s. But realistically, let's look at 1960s. You have people like Patrice Lumumba. He was never even a master's degree, as far as I know. You have people like Sekou Touré. You have people like, except Kwame Nkrumah, he was a doctor. You have people like Sekou Touré. You have people like Malcolm X. You have people like, Thomas Sankara. You have people like, you have a lot of them who were revolutionaries, people who really helped Africa to gain the so-called independence, people who shaped the world in order to embark in the process of African independence. Only few graduates, but today we have thousands of them. As I said, 156 million people in the world who have master's degree and PhD degrees actually. How comes that the situation in Africa today is very hectic, whereby a lot of guys, a lot of young people in Africa, young women, young men are dying. You see the bodies floating on the Mediterranean waters, because these young people wanted to reach to Italy, to Spain, to France, to England, in order to live their European dreams, right? Because in Africa, it's a kind of a hell. But when they get there, in most cases, it turns into a European nightmare or an American nightmare. So the question is, why do we have this situation whereby we have a lot of intellectuals in Africa today, but we have these kind of difficulties? You know, we have 60% of arable land in the world in Africa, but we are dying hungry in Africa. You know, Africa is the home to many hungry people in the world. Why is this situation possible? So the question we need to ask is this education that we are receiving, this intellectualism that we have in Africa, is it really a tool for African emancipation and liberation, or it is a tool for African alienation? That's the question I'm dropping to you to think about it. When you look at your society, when you look at your environment, when you look the condition of the people in your community, and look at the number of graduates, look at the number of master's degrees, look at the number of bachelor's degrees, and look at the conditions of life. So is this education really a tool for, liberation, or is it a tool for alienation? You see, alienation, when you become alienated person, you become a stranger to yourself, because you don't even look at your suffering as it's worthy of attention, In other words, you become at peace with your suffering, with your affliction, with your predicament. And you don't even look for solution to that, because you have made peace with that. You have made peace with your chains. That's the condition of alienated people. So alienated people as well are the people, as I said, strangers to themselves, means they identify themselves with something else rather than being who they are as African people. So I think this is really the condition of Africa today. So because now we have many graduates and our problems still persist, I think we need to redefine in the context of the concept of education, because in most cases time changes, so does reality that people are confronting, but we tend to incline to old concepts and old understanding. We don't always realize that the time has changed, and we need to adapt, or we need to put ourselves in position according to what time demands or what time requires. So I believe that we need to redefine the concept of education, and this is what I found as a proposition for the definition of an educated person, as an Afrocentric education, by the way. And I believe this is just me, right? But you can also find your own way of redefining the concept of who is an educated person, because it must make sense to you. If it doesn't make sense to you, then it doesn't deserve any attention. Then, you don't have to worry about it. But for me, a definition that makes sense to me is that an educated person in this 21st century is that person who has an ideology and pursues that ideology. Why am I saying so? Because the aim of education is to solve a particular problem at individual level as well as at the collective level, right? And I will explain that later. So for you to solve your problem, you must understand what is that problem. But in the context of globalized world, we must put our problems in the context of ideologies, because what drives the world today is ideology, right? Chinese have an ideology to conquer the world according to their views of the world. America has for a long time possessed and controlled our world according to the view of American people, which is capitalistic view, neoliberalism, free markets, all these things that we know. European people have controlled the world, also according to the European, to their own European view of the world, which is their own ideology. Push Christianity in the whole world, get every people becoming Christian, and get every country becoming capitalist, and let our industry go into the world, into Africa, and exploit resources and stuff like that, right? And that ideology of European people is always backed up by what we call racism or white supremacy, which is a mistreatment of other people based on color. I mean, I'm not accusing anyone. This is what we have seen throughout the history of European people. Their history or their interaction with other people create conditions of enslaved and slave masters, right? Create the conditions of oppressed people and oppressors. And all of that being based on the color of the skin. So now, as African people, if we want to improve ourselves, we need to have also an ideology. So if you get to be educated, that education should be giving you an ideology and should be allowing you to pursue that ideology and to achieve it. An ideology of African people is Ubuntu, living collectively and mostly doing things collectively, because most of people, when they talk about Ubuntu, they see helping each other because we are brothers and sisters and stuff like that. No, but Ubuntu goes beyond than that. It's all about learning how to live together, to work together collectively, and to confront our situations collectively and overcoming them collectively, right? That's how I understand Ubuntu. So you, as an educated person, you must have an ideology, because that's what education must give you. That ideology will be obviously congruent to your economic needs, to your political needs, to your social needs, to your, every holistic needs as a person should be, how can I put it, should be based on that ideology. What do you want to do, as a person, as an African person, first of all, and also in a community as African people, what do we want to do? So if the education cannot produce this ideology, if education makes you to think like as an European or as a Chinese, if education makes you less African, if education that you are going through makes you, I don't know how, then that is a tool for alienation. And whatever certificate that you have obtained out of that education is just a certificate for mental alienation of you as an African person. And education, proper education, should be making you a real African person. And how does it make? Which means, what is the purpose of education? How does it make you or give you an ideology? There are four main things that education must accomplish in the life of every person. One thing is that education must teach you firstly about your environment. That's the first thing that education must teach everyone, is about your environment. You need to learn your world. You need to learn your universe. What is under your feet? What kind of resources? What kind of, what kind of wealth is in your environments? What is the interaction, economic interaction in your world? Those are the things, those are the things or the tools or the equipments or the items that should be make the package of the first thing that education should be providing for you as an African person. And the second thing that education has to provide for you is the capability to affect or to influence your environment. It means education has to provide you the needed skills, ability for you to transform or to affect or to apply any possible change, positive change in your environment in order to solve your problem as a person and as a community. It means, for example, if you have gold in Ghana, education should firstly teach you that you have a gold in Ghana and how you can use that gold, and that education should be secondly give you the power to obviously transform that gold in whatever that you have to do or what it's supposed to be done with the gold for the solutions that you need in your own life. And the third thing that education must teach everyone is how to live together as a society, how you can live together, the interaction or the relationship between one individual to others, right? So, because you are not alone, you are not in a jungle, you are amongst other people. So education should help you to understand how to interact with other people. And the last thing that education should provide for you is the values of you as a patriot of your country, but in this context, the patriot of Africa, because we are aiming towards the United States of Africa. So the education should create a patriot out of you, right? It means should bring in you the values of patriotism. You need to learn how to love your culture. You need to learn how to love and to value Africa and African, value systems. You need to always seek the interests of Africa in everything that you do. And if education doesn't fulfill that, that means it's not education that you need in the context of Africa. Now, when we look all these items that I've just, the 4 items that I've just, mentioned, that should be provided by a proper education, we need to look now in Africa to see if we had an education that taught you and I about our environment, that taught you and I on how to affect or to influence our environment in order to create the economy. If we had an education that taught you and I how to live together as African people, and lastly, if we had an education that taught you and I how to love Africa and the African culture, we would have been in the situation in which we are today. We wouldn't have been in a situation where we have people who are running away from Africa because they cannot afford to eat, cannot afford to, to look out after themselves while they have bachelor degrees in the pockets. They go to swim the Mediterranean water in order to join Spain. We couldn't have a situation like this if we had that education which provides the 4 items that I've just mentioned. And secondly, if we had education that provide all these things, we wouldn't have people, the brains in Africa who are running away from Africa to go to belong into some overseas organizations in order to gain, in order for their own personal gain or profits, without thinking that they are the ones who should obviously lay the foundation for the future of Africa. So, in conclusion, we need to realize that the current African intellectualism is a tool for African or of African alienation rather than the tool for African emancipation. And how can we approach this reality? We can approach it by coming up with a Afrocentric education that makes you and I a person who knows his universe, and a person who is able to influence his universe, and a person who knows how to live together with his peers, and lastly, a person who loves himself, a person who stands in front of his mirror every morning and is in deep love with the person that he sees in his mirror staring back at him. We need that kind of education. That's the reason why we have the Free-Minded Pan-African Academy within the ACUP. The reason is that we don't want to just come up with political rallies, telling people to vote for us. This is a deception of the system today. We are being told that democracy is the rule of the people. Who is that ruler who has no knowledge, who has no awareness, who has been alienated completely, but who is supposed to be, the ruler of a democratic system? Look in our world. The masses are ignorant, because most of the time when we talk about the masses, we say ignorant, a group of ignorant people, right? But they are told they are the rulers of a democratic system. It's a deception. So with the ACUP, we are not just trying to crowd the people to ask them to vote for the party. No, we want to educate the African people. Every African child has to be educated to know his environment, to understand how he can influence that environment, to live together, and also to love himself. This is what we want to do through the Free-Minded Pan-African Academy, which is a branch of the African Continental Unity Party. And we have a curriculum already designed, as you will see it, or you have seen it maybe on our website, www.freemindedafrica.org. You might have seen it already. It's a wonderful curriculum that we believe will create leaders in politics also and in business, because that's what Africa needs as we're speaking right now. So we are here for a new educational system. We are here for a new mindset, a new approach to our problems, but we want to get them, you know, I don't want to use the term masses, but we want to get every African man and woman involved in this, because we are no longer in that time whereby we need to sit down and wait for a particular leader or a particular hero to come and save us from imperialism and oppression that we are busy facing, even sometimes from our own governments, right? It is time that we need to be involved in every process that affects our life. We need to be involved in every solution that we need. I'm always saying that your education is important. Your knowledge of history is important. Your Kemetic knowledge is also essential. Even your religion too. But your life will never change until you embark in the politics of your liberation. And if you don't do that, you will forever remain in the politics of your oppression. And that politics is the politics of your enemies. It is high time now that we need to get involved in this. So we invite you to register with the Free-Minded Pan-African Academy. Take our course. It's literally free. There's only one thing that you need to do, is to purchase the material, which is the book, and that material is only $10 US. Well, how much does it cost for you to be free, for you to gain the knowledge that will empower your life? You know, and we have been already paying high price for doing nothing. We have paid expensive price, you know, for being ignorant. So if you want to change your status, you want to change your life, you want to change your conditions, you need to learn something. And I need to finish by mentioning something that is very important, that I find is very fundamental. In the 21st century, there's no more need for teacher and and students, because in the past we needed to rely on teachers, because knowledge was not always a popular thing. We only had few number of people who had the knowledge, therefore we had to rely on them so that they can teach us. But in the 21st century, you don't necessarily need a teacher, and you don't need a student. Why? Because knowledge is everywhere now. And what is important is you learning, an active learning way. Is you being an active learner rather than a passive learner. Because mostly when we talk about teacher and learner, we're talking about one-way transfer of knowledge. For example, you're sitting down, somebody's there teaching you, feeding you with information, but your brain is not really active. The only person that is active is the one who is transferring knowledge to you, right? But when you put yourself in a position where you want to learn, right, you put your mind, you activate your mind to search for information, to analyze that information and to make sense of that information, to have a takeaway from that. It means information is everywhere. We are exposed to unlimited numbers of stimulus, right, around us. So how much do you learn every day? That's why I said in the 21st century, we don't necessarily need teachers, we need learners. In the past, we needed teachers, right, because they were very important. They had the knowledge, which was not everywhere. But now, the knowledge is on the internet. The knowledge is on the books. There's nobody who can prevent you from reading. So in this moment, we need more learners than teachers. That means you need people who actively engage themselves in the process of learning. People who are able to look in the universe, in the environment, and capture the information and learn, interpret, make sense of that, and use that for their own development. We don't really need teachers, because, as I said, when you talk about teacher, you talk about one-way transfer of knowledge or of information, whereby on one side the mind is not active really, but the active mind is only that's from which knowledge is coming, right? So that is very important. And in whatever you learn, whatever you analyze, whatever information you get, this, you shouldn't really forget it. Everything that touches your life, physically, spiritually, intellectually, economically, or in any way should be transformed into an instrument of your liberation. If it doesn't fulfill that requirement, you have to throw it in the trash can of history. That is a quote from ancestor John Henry Clark. Thank you very much for being with us today. Please purchase the book that we have produced. What time is it? We have done this for you. We have invested in knowledge and money in this book for you to learn, for you to understand the nature, the world, the time in which we are today, because we have to be in the same page. If you don't understand what time is it, the situation in the world and which direction the world is going, you might not be able to understand the strategies that we will implement within the ACUP. For you to understand this, you need to understand the essence of the time. And for you to understand this, please get a copy of this book and read it. It's only $10 US. You can find it on the Free Minded website, which is, as I said, freemindedafrica.org. It's ORG, sorry, my bad. So please purchase the copy of your book and be in touch. Let us do this together because it's all about us. Peace and power to all of us. Thank you.